This is the Nick Vertucci Show. I am Nick Vertucci, and for my co-host Valerie Brill, Valerie, let's bring it in.
Cue the intro, yeah.
Let's go. Bring your motherfucking receipt and show us so we could support you. If not, shut the fuck up. Come out hot, if I can ask you about Jaka.
We had an inappropriately close friendship.
Okay, I'm gonna press you.
The casinos cheat.
They cheat. How?
What's up, guys?
You're right, you're wrong, you're right. What am I gonna put on a pair of glasses and a
no,
nose
I
and
remember.
walk in?
Telling everybody I'm the best.
I can't punt. That would look bad.
The mental anguish.
This is what my plan was from the beginning, is that nobody remembers her name.
We have today with us someone I have been waiting patiently to interview. Faraz Jaka, you are doing phenomenal things. It is Women's History Month, and I thought it would be great to bring you in because so many of your students are prominent women in the poker community, and they're crushing it. And I'm like, oh, you guys are like the silent assassins in poker. Everyone's, throwing daggers at all the other training sites, and you guys are just quietly churning out all the winners while everyone else argues. You were a WPT Player of the Year, 2009, 2010, 6 WPT final tables. You got a World Series of Poker bracelet last year, right? And you're just a very accomplished and pretty amazing guy all around. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I haven't had the pleasure to really sit down and talk with either of you too much. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, but we, at the WSOP Maine, we were at the same table for like a minute and a half. You had a very
We chatted
big,
for a sec.
healthy, thick stack, and I had just that little 3 chips in front of me. But we got a chance to meet, so it was nice.
Yeah, and I actually was on the same table as you for many hours at the Monster Stack,
Yep,
right? We
yep,
both
yep.
we both busted
we
in the
busted out
exact
at the
same
same
hand.
time. Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
first time we met, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, you were just a phenomenal person at the table, really good the way you carry yourself, the way you talk to people. I find you to be just like a very interesting, quiet, like slowly successful, quietly successful guy in the community. You don't throw daggers, like pretty cool guy. So listen, what is going on with you? I wanted to start with Jaka Coaching, because I see it everywhere. I see all these winners photos. When did you start Jaka Coaching?
So I started, let's start with when did I start coaching? I started coaching in 2020 during the pandemic. I've always had people reach out to me for coaching, never really had the time. I mean, I coached a couple of people here and there, but not really too seriously. And all the tours got shut down. My wife was pregnant. We're having a baby. And I was like, I know I can't be on tour to the extent I've been the last 15 years. A, because I want to be there for my family. B, I also had some like kind of lingering, ongoing back issues that were getting worse. And I felt like traveling all the time, sitting long hours, maybe not the best thing for me. So I really wanted to kind of find an alternative route for a career, but still, ideally within poker. So during that period, I went and tried streaming. I tried YouTubing. I tried coaching. The streaming thing, I realized wasn't for me. I actually had a call with Jamie Stapes. I was, before I get into something, I try to talk to other people that are really successful at it and try to understand like what's the lifestyle, what's the upside, what are the sacrifices you got to make. And he was like, you got to stream 5 days a week. If you miss a day, your followers go to the competitors. And I was like, that sounds awful. I was like, I'm trying to optimize for lifestyle right now. I think if you're in your 20s, like, sure, like I grinded like that in my 20s. So I would maybe do that. But kind of check that one off the box. I had a lot of traction on kind of YouTube and coaching. I ended up coaching like 120 people over the course of a year and a half, one-on-one. Their results were phenomenal. Also, just like hearing the way they would talk poker from session 1 to like the 3rd or 4th session was really inspiring to me, just to see how big of a difference.
And it's just tournament coaching, right?
Yeah, just tournament coaching. So yeah, I really just like fell in love with the coaching. So I was like, hey, I got a lot of traction here. I know I'm making a big difference in all these players. So I was like, how can I scale this thing? Because I had a lot of people messaging who maybe couldn't afford the rate. I was also kind of getting tapped out on time. So I started doing group coaching where I did this, weekly group coaching thing. And that kind of just evolved into a training site. And then I rebranded it as Jaka Coaching about a year later. And yeah, now we're a full-fledged training site with, training videos. We still do that weekly group coaching. We share, we coach people on their hand histories, like day in, day out on Discord. And the thing I like the most is we're really big on community. And, I go and have, lunch and dinner with students at events. We do meetup events during the WSOP, get everyone together because a big part of our core is kind of serious recreational players or semi-pros. That's how we started. Now we have content for pros as well. But those people are the majority of the people, and a lot of them don't have a crew, right? All the pros like have someone to talk poker with, someone to hang out with, and a lot of those recreational players are kind of lone wolves. And when you kind of put them together, they're just a lot stronger. There's much better network effects. They're more likely to keep playing and enjoy it and do better and have someone to bounce ideas off. And yeah, so that's kind of where we are now.
So one big thing that happened to Jaka Coaching was there was a sticker on a bottle on a table at Hustler Casino Live during a very big hand where a woman named Robbi was playing versus a guy named Garrett.
So
I don't know if you remember that.
The question is do you put RFID in all of your tumblers?
Yeah.
Or
so
just
that
a
wasn't
few?
your tumbler, was it? It was just a sticker on the tumbler?
We may or may not have some proprietary coaching techniques.
How did that moment affect you and your business? Because you just I like a surge in probably searching for Jaka Coaching probably went through the roof. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually in Panama City at the time playing, I think it was W Coops or Scoops. So I was there for like 3 weeks by myself, just kind of grinding out of a condo there. And yeah, a couple people messaged me like, hey, did you see what your student did? And I didn't really like look at it too seriously. I just thought it must have been a funny hand or whatever. And yeah, it turned into like a real big PR moment that really could go in either direction for me. You know what I mean? Like
which direction did it go?
Well, it was it was positive.
I think for sure positive. I mean,
yeah.
Right. Like it's just a lot more people became aware of the brand and just familiarized themselves with the logo. A lot of people ask me like, hey, did you get a bunch of signups right when that happened? And no, because that's just not the way kind of marketing works. Like people aren't going to all of a sudden just sign up for a training site because they see it there, but now they're aware of the brand. So in the future, when we do, ads or promotions, people are already familiar with that brand. And it gives a bit more credibility. Oh, I've seen it around, even if they might not even remember that they've seen it there, but it just kind of gets, stitched into your brand.
It's basic branding. Yeah.
So
and it
Jack
was such
4
go ahead.
Was a marketing campaign. Sorry.
That's all right. No, go ahead.
No, that's what I was going to say. Jack 4 was your marketing campaign. Obviously. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that moment, like, I didn't know until, we started discussing it that Robbi was your student. And like, how did it feel in the weeks following that to talk about one of your students being, being accused of cheating? And yeah, like how does a coach like you or someone whose site is being represented by this person feel? Like what did you guys go through?
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, there's us like trying to get all the information and trying to figure out what happened as well. There is a lot. The most interesting part was I probably had the most information out of anyone because I've coached her. I know how she thinks. I know she talks about poker. And I was seeing all these like self-proclaimed, experts in like catching cheating and like even some of the high stakes pros saying like, oh, because she did this, she's cheating and this and that. And I'm like, no, like she did those things because we talked about that in our coaching session. Little things like, oh, her looking at her cards. Like I actually, I coached her after the first stream where I thought she was kind of giving away some tells when she was looking at her cards. So I was like, hey, next session, I want you to look at your cards when you're not even looking at them, just to kind of balance it off. And so people can't get a read off you. And that was like such a big discussion of whether or not she looked at the cards. I knew exactly what she was doing there. So there's just like a lot of little things that, that I knew that maybe the public didn't know.
Well, let me ask you this question. Did anybody, knowing that you coached her, knowing that you had inside, where you had knowledge of who she is, how she plays, did anyone doing these investigations and kicking up all this dust, did anyone contact you to try to get a statement or have you on?
So yeah, I jumped on a podcast with Joey Ingram. Um, I, I had a lot of people actually call me and reach out to me. Um, and without like kind of dropping names, like definitely like in a situation like that, like a lot of people are, kind of show they could be a little two-faced, like saying one things to me and then saying something else publicly, saying something else to Robbie. So that was definitely interesting, like seeing a lot of people kind of reveal their colors in kind of scenarios like that. But yeah, I would say people didn't come and kind of dig into the details, like the example I just told you, which kind of like is the easy, like check that off the box. Yeah, I don't think too many investigators, I say, came and asked me some of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. You would think they would, because like you said, like you actually know her tendencies. You may have spoken with her. You may have had private conversations with her after, where you really, she's telling you what she was thinking, etc. So yeah, like I said, I think that would have been the even myself, I probably should have done that when I was at the World Series of Poker with you. We were going to talk, and we never had a chance to do that. So I'm really glad.
Now,
that
I
we're
would
able to do
say
that.
it was a little bit tricky because, like the first part is like, how much do I get involved, right? Because I only know as much as the public knows. Plus, my conversations with her and just kind of knowing her and how she talks and stuff like that. So yeah, I did have some extra information. But the second part is I'm gonna look kind of biased sticking up for her just because
Right.
she's representing my site, she's my student. So that part's also a little bit tricky.
Yeah, because there was kind of a conflict of like where you would lean. Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of just like sat back for the most part. I let out a statement and I jumped on that podcast once, but I think a lot of people kind of jumped to really passionate conclusions like very early on, and to me, that like anyone who did that was very foolish. Because
Agreed.
as you know, like as you got more information, people's opinions kind of went back and forth and back and forth. So
Right.
I've learned from other kind of situations, whether it's like mainstream news or within poker, that the best thing to do in moments like that is to kind of just sit back and take in all the information. Same thing with like, some of these things that happened with bots recently or the whole card showing on these online poker sites. Like
Yeah.
even with that, I'm always just like sit back, take in all the information, like see what comes out over the next few weeks, and then form your opinion once you get more information.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
So, I didn't realize that she got coaching after the first session or after after the first two. That makes sense because I actually watched all of her hands. I watched the 3 episodes she was on, and you can tell she plays a lot different after that first episode. But the third one was the one where it was the most drastic change. I don't know how much she was implementing of what you told her. So she contacted you after the first session and she wanted a coaching session. Is that?
Yeah, I can't remember the details of like how we ended up,
Yeah.
but yeah, I coached her. I think like we had done like a couple MTT coaching sessions, like maybe 2, and then she was gonna play on this cash game. And then we either did like 1 or 2. I think we did like 2 coaching sessions related to the cash game, and one of them was us literally going through the entire stream and watching her hands and other players and kind of coming up with a strategy for the next game.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Well, I was going to ask this. So, in your opinion, and the reason I think this is important is it just goes to everyone's opinion of her skill level. And this is not to like make her better because she's coached by you or worse, and make her look bad because you're coached. The truth, what is the truth on what you believe? What type of poker player at that time was sitting there? Like, is it, in your opinion, very possible for her to have made that mistake? I mean, you've spoken with her after. Give me, I guess, 2-part question. Where was she really as a player? Meaning, like, was she that green where this is, and you have reasons why this was possible and she did it? And then after this happened, what did she tell you? What did she tell you? Because there was a couple different stories about. I thought it was the hand before Jack 3. I thought I had blockers, which I didn't. Didn't make sense. But give us a little dissertation on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go into too much detail on like private conversations and that kind of thing, but in general, I will say this. I will say, um, she was very new to poker at that time. Like I think like it was within that year she actually started playing and taking it seriously. And we're, talking about blockers and this and that. And the thing that I thought was ridiculous was I thought it was fairly obvious. She's a fairly like newer to the player game, just hearing her kind of talk about it, which is normal for anyone. And when she goes on like Joey Ingram podcast, he's like grilling her on like why she played this street like that and blockers and this and that. And I'm like that's very intimidating to like be like questioned amongst like top pros in the game, like asking you to explain your strategy. Like that's very difficult for a lot of players in general, let alone someone kind of newer to the game. So yeah, I think it's just like a difficult spot to be put in. And I've had a lot of times in coaching sessions where I'm like, all right, hey, like, how come you didn't 4-bet ace king there? And then like she'll start talking about something else. And it's just because that's the way her brain is. She's thinking at 1,000,000 miles an hour. She has like a lot of different things in her head. She's trying to compartmentalize. So like I was watching in the interviews and like they'd be like, oh, she's lying because like she like isn't answering the question. I'm like, no, that's just Robbi. That's how she is.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Her brain's just, thinking about 1,000,000 things at once.
Yeah. Sorry, Veronica. I have one more that's on this subject. So let me.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Without, of course, I respect any private conversations. Not asking you for that. Tell me if this is on limits to ask. Can you tell us the final thing of what she told you happened? Like, and I don't think I'm assuming if she's innocent, it would just be something that somebody that didn't really understand the game. Like, what was the final tally of what happened?
I mean, I first of all, I had to like think back to the conversation. It's like I had to think about it, but I don't care to go into kind of. I mean, basically, she just told me the truth, like what happened in the hand, and that was it. Like I don't remember
that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
What was her truth?
Yeah, it was just like she had some logic based on like why she did what she did, and like either she goofed up some parts of it or she didn't, and that was it. Yeah, I mean she definitely thought she had a pair there. So she did misread her hand. At least
that's what I'm getting at.
That's what she had told me, and that's what I believe. I can't prove anything other than kind of what she said.
No.
But
yeah, of course, we're not. Listen, we're not trying to deep dive into all the personal stuff.
Yeah,
basically, like you gave the answer, but at the end. So in the end, no matter that she was embarrassed at first, she said she thought I had a 3, then it was this. But the bottom line, at the end of the day, she thought she was hero calling with a pair of 3s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's what I was wanting to know. Like, that's the final tally? Like, that's what she told you.
I know. I will say she was getting a lot of pressure from like media, a lot of people saying like do this, do that, like and I think that was probably very difficult for her, like figure out what to do, that hey, like so I think she's just in a very difficult spot very early in her poker career.
Yeah, I think the chatter after the hand, like that she was saying some things like I'm playing the player, I think it was just nervous chatter. I think she just felt so uncomfortable with the situation that she just was like trying to ramble her way out of it, and she was saying so many different things that like it was confusing, but I could kind of tell now looking back at it, she just didn't know how to handle it. She probably didn't want to be embarrassed, so she may have said this, then she, so I could see being that new and being in like the spotlight of something so big, just like panicking, if you will.
And we did in our coaching session come up with some strategies of how she could maybe attack Garrett and what some of his weaknesses are that she might be able to take advantage of. So she didn't say this to me, but it's possible like she really wanted to win that hand against him and kind of went for it. She didn't say that to me, but that's just me kind of speculating based on things we had talked about.
So as her coach and as a professional, very successful poker player, looking back at it all, do you think that the hand was fairly received, like fairly reviewed by the public after Garrett's initial accusations? And do you think that the accusations were fair in that hand? Like, if you put yourself in Garrett's shoes, would you have had the same reaction?
You know, I will say this. I will say it is a bizarre hand in just the fact that as you get more information, your opinion just keeps swinging back and forth. And that kind of happened to everyone, right? So that is just it's a bizarre hand. Like, it's like there should be a documentary about it if there's not already. It's so weird. So I will say, I sympathize with the community for being unsure for so long until like more and more information came out. Yeah, that's all I'll put it. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think I had more information than anyone else out there. And yeah, just with some of the details that I shared and a lot more stuff than that as well.
Was she distraught after this in any way, or did it seem like she was handling it better than you would think? Internally, not like her outward persona.
Yeah, I think she was pretty open and honest about how she felt in her own interviews. So I think she could speak for herself on that.
Yeah.
I will say that, you know, I was the whistleblower for the Mike Postle stuff, and her and him, like Postle and Robbi, had a completely different response to, you know, the public and the questions. Like, she went on every podcast, she answered everyone's questions, she was sassy. Like, you know, she did not, when I look back, she did not come across as someone who, you know, was cheating in the hand. She came across as someone who, you know, like you said, like had like a weird spot, played a little bit weird, new to the game, and then, you know, couldn't really explain it well, but was, you know, not afraid to go talk to people, whereas Postle, you know, wouldn't talk to anyone.
I would say she'd hung out with our community, with other Jaka coaching students, like several times before that, been to our kind of WSOP meetup parties. And that was kind of the same reaction most of our students had that had spent time with her, that like, oh, that doesn't seem like her. Whereas like lots of times when something like that happens, they'd be like, oh, I knew there was something weird about that person. Like,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Like, I didn't really hear that.
Yeah.
Again, at the end of the day, I just have the same information everyone else has, along with kind of what I
totally.
shared with her. But that's generally was the sentiment.
Yeah.
And Faraz, I want you to know, if I ask you another, like a question, and that still goes to the comment of, you know, I don't want to share that, don't ever get frustrated. Just say you don't want to answer, you know. But what comes to my mind is, what the fuck was I going to ask him? I was so concerned about him not caring about that. I was going to ask him again. Go. I'll
Well,
get
I
it.
was
I'll
going
pull
to
it.
move on from
Yeah,
this.
do it. But I do want to come back and ask him. I
We
think
might come back.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if it's by design, but there's a lot of women on your training site, a lot of women that are becoming very successful in tournaments. And, you know, as a woman myself in poker, the training sites are heavily dominated by men. When you see the students that are being coached by these training sites, it's almost always male students. And so your page is constantly retweeting all of these women who are winning or running deep into these big tournaments, and like it feels like a comfortable place for women to go for coaching and training. So did you do that on purpose? Like, is this
Not at all. Not at all. That said, I definitely have recognized that. We have a disproportionate amount of women in our training now, compared to like
especially relative?
when you look at relative to how many play poker, period. And they're crushing, and they're awesome people as well. Like, a lot of them I've become like personal friends with, and it's, you know, it's like when really cool, successful people kind of start combining, like they start attracting other people like that. So it's just kind of become like a really cool community there. And it's not even like just the women in Jaka coaching hang out with each other. It's just the Jaka coaching community, period. I can't say exactly why that's happened. I have had women tour students tell me certain things. One thing I've heard is that they went to kind of coaching groups within women, and a lot of it was like about like how we can use our sexuality as advantage at the table, how we should show our boobs, how we should talk to people. And like, I'll say this, like, sure, if that gives an edge, like that's fine. Like, I don't have a problem with that, but I don't think that's where you want to start. Right? It's the same thing as like, I don't teach like you know, like I talk about image and how you can kind of dress a certain way. And I teach that to my students, but that's not the first thing I teach people. The first thing I teach them is how to play good fundamental poker, and how to exploit other people's weaknesses and that kind of thing. So I just feel like I don't really treat the women any different, you know. I train them the same way I train everyone. I think one of our kind of superpowers at Jaka Coaching is we're all very good at taking complicated subjects and explaining them in very simple ways. You know, I have a background in business. I've always like spent a lot of time like outside of my poker circle, so I have a really well-rounded friend circle, and I think that makes it easier for me to kind of communicate in ways that are relatable to a lot of my students who a lot of, you know, have a job, have a family, have a business, that type of thing. And I really go out of my way to hire coaches that I think are very good presenters, very social, very good at explaining themselves, not just, and they're very good poker players as well. But being good teachers is a big part of kind of my strategy there. So I think that helps as well.
Yeah, I remember.
One more thing.
Yeah.
I did have another female student of mine tell me that just like in another training site she was at, like some of the jokes and stuff were just like very just like guy jokes, and you know, talking about women a certain way and this and that kind of rubbed them the wrong way. Again, I'm not judging anyone, but I'm just relaying like some of the information that I've had some of my female students come and say why they're kind of more comfortable here. Yeah.
So I just want to say one more thing about his female student. So I noticed that Casey Mills, Jackie Burkhart, Lily Newhouse are your students, but there's one particular student who made my life hell at a table for like 8 hours, and she was so good, and my brain was scrambled every time I played a hand with her, and I was so frustrated with her, and she ended up knocking me out of the tournament. Darius Justice? Is it Darius Justice?
Yeah, Darius.
She's a crusher, and I remember like her calling me down with ace high and being good. I'm like, how is she doing this? And she was just ruthless, almost a silent assassin. So like really impressive stuff. And now that I actually found out today that she's one of your students, because I saw it. Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, well, this makes sense. Like you know, I have to call your school and like be like, can I join? Because I can't beat your students.
I just did that post the other day celebrating women, and we were like coming up with the photos for it. And I know all those people. I've hung out with all of them. And just like as we were gathering them, I'm like, God, like there's so many. Like this is awesome. Like I didn't even realize it until I was putting together all those photos. And I think we easily missed like, you know, like over a dozen more pip photos too. It's just hard to get everyone.
And Casey Mills just got like 2 rings in like a couple weeks or less than that, maybe a week.
Yeah.
And
Angela
then I'm like, oh, she's your
won.
student too?
Yeah, Angela Jordison won Breakout Player of the Year, almost won POY and Female Player of the Year as well other year.
That's awesome. So this is what I remembered. This is something that was a huge contention and question in the community. Do you have any insight of why Robbi gave the money back, in your opinion, or maybe something she said, so we could just get like that elephant out of the room?
I'm sure she probably told me, but I don't remember. So I assume it was just whatever's consistent with what she kind of said publicly.
Yeah.
Okay. There was nothing that drew my attention to it.
Yeah. I think her final stand was she just didn't want to take the heat, figured he was so influential, and just didn't want to not be able to play again or whatever, and wanted it to go away. That's ultimately it.
Yeah, she did say that she did tell me that she has a lot of friends like who work for the company that like invited her to this, and she just felt like she did something wrong at first, like she screwed everything up, and everyone's like upset, and like I think she just felt bad and wanted things to go away and just to go back to her fun home game, you know?
Yeah, I got it.
That was the only weird spot for me, why she gave it back. That was weird, because I would have told Garrett to kick rocks.
Yeah, well, definitely you have a special personality.
Yeah.
So it could be why.
I am a sweet and kind person, yes.
Tell the viewers why you acquired the nickname The Toilet.
So when I first started playing in college at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, was playing in dorm games. I didn't really have anyone teach me at first, so I would just play suited cards because I just like suited cards. You get a flush, they must be good.
Right.
As a result, I would get a lot of flushes, and my dorm mates would keep getting annoyed at all the flushes I get and be like, "Damn it, you freaking toilet, you flushes again."
Yeah, yeah,
So they
got
kept
it.
calling me the toilet, and then I went to sign up for an online screen name at Royal Vegas Poker on the Prima network, and I wasn't really thinking about it too seriously. I was like, "Oh, they call me the toilet. I'm the toilet." Oops. Um, so yeah, and then before you know it, there's headlines of like the toilet flushes away the competition, the
Oh,
toilet gets
yeah.
flushed down the drain, and it just
That's a
became
good.
very
That's a good
And
marketable.
you
tactic.
leaned into it, so that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
What happened with checkraise.com? You launched a poker site in South America?
Yeah, so I launched a real money gaming site in Brazil. That was maybe 7 years ago. I can't remember anymore. But yeah, I think we shut down about 5 years ago. So that was about 8 years ago we launched. We were live for 3 years. So yeah, it was a real money gaming site in Brazil that had a
Why
lot of
Brazil?
so we did a pretty in-depth analysis on what is the best market to launch in and some of the variables that go into it. So, I'm a startup guy at heart, and one of the big things in startups that I think a lot of poker sites do wrong is you want to launch quickly, experiment, get an MVP out there, an MVP, minimally viable product. It just get something shitty out there that can get traction and get feedback, and then build based around that. And that is very challenging to do in poker because with poker, you need to create a software, first of all, which is expensive, which you're going to spend, millions of dollars. We're able to launch only spending about 750K, which everyone told us we would never be able to do. Um, so you have to spend all this money up front, and then you got to do the licensing part. And if you want to launch in somewhere like UK and you need to get the license in Isle of Man, or if you want to do the US, you got to get it in Vegas or wherever, and you're going to end up spending way more money, millions of dollars just on the licensing. Whereas with Brazil and a lot of other countries, you could just get a Curacao license where you end up spending like 50 to 60K in kind of legal licensing stuff, and then you could launch. So for us, it was just like a strategic thing of where can we spend as little as possible and start experimenting with the software. So that was part one. The other reason Brazil is massive population, right? You got like, over 200 million people. Poker is very popular there, growing at, insane rates. Poker there, like the way we have pool tables in bars in the US, like they have poker tables in bars. And it's like a party there. So I went there for 3 months to launch and had a blast. I did this awesome like home game crashing where I went and like, to games in the farm, to games in the city, like all over. And it was really cool. So yeah, that's why we launched there as a test market. And if we're successful, to start scaling to Canada, to other places in Europe, and so on.
So what ended up happening? Why did you close down?
Yeah. So basically, there's kind of 10 things that could have gone wrong that can kind of cause you to fail that we kind of identified from day one. And we were able to kind of crush probably 8 out of 10 of those things. A lot of, people told us assimilating to Brazilian culture was going to be very difficult with the language barrier. And, I'm a vagabond, like I'm all about that. So we really got in there and crushed that aspect of it. Um, User acquisition, all that stuff went well. Unfortunately, there was a lot of technical debt in the software where there was kind of some early architectural mistakes that were made that were very hard to unwind. And let me try to explain that in a more kind of layman's term. When you think about software is kind of like a big city, right? Like think about the city of New York. Like it's built a certain way. And now, 100 years later, you're like, hey, people really like farm to table food. Hey, we need these things, we need those things. But it's really hard to do that once the infrastructure is built a certain way. So you can't just redo everything because that's too expensive. You have to kind of patch things up and build around it.
Most software is like that.
Yeah, and poker, I would say what I've learned is poker is one of the most difficult software, like compared to like, gaming, like whatever. A lot of people don't understand this. A lot of people are just like, look at all the poker sites, like you guys are idiots, like blah, blah, blah. I learned a lot kind of being on the operator side. What makes it so difficult is there's all this red tape. So for example, we had a Curacao license. You have to use the servers that Curacao wants you to use because that's how they make money. So our developers would be like, hey, like these are like old antiquated servers. This is going to make building like very difficult, but we have no choice. And then, you got to deal with payment processing and there's whole sorts of rules there. You can't, and then, with cloud, cloud hosting and stuff, you can't use AWS. So you end up with all these very limited set of resources that you have to make work. And that makes it very difficult. And there's a lot more reasons why it's difficult, but yeah, we had a very beautiful software from the outside. Users loved it, but internally there was a lot of issues, and we kind of got to a point where we realized we are going to have to re-scrap the software, which was a big deal. So yeah, it kind of sucks to like have so much traction and still fail. We had about 25,000 free accounts opened, would converted about 1,000 of them to depositors, and we're on our way to convert a couple thousand more. But yeah, unfortunately, software kind of killed us.
So you're a huge software guy. You're from San Jose, which is where I reside.
I would not say I'm not a huge software guy. My co-founder was kind of the technical co-founder. I was just on the user acquisition.
Okay.
I actually got involved in the software side a little bit later. Once we realized that I should be in the meetings with the developers because of those early like issues that happened. I really should have been in there from day one. Yeah. So I learned a lot from that experience. I 10x my business knowledge in those 3 years. Working 70 hours a week on this thing, disappeared from the poker world. I didn't tell anyone about it really. We were super loud in Brazil, but not in the US. That was a strategic reason. So a lot of people don't even know about this, but if you're Brazilian, they all know about it because we're all over the news there. Yeah, 10x my business knowledge. And now I'm using a lot of those things that I learned there to kind of help grow Jaka Coaching.
And is Jaka Coaching your primary job right now?
Totally. I eat, sleep, and breathe it.
Where do you reside now?
Yeah, I grew up in San Jose, California, but I left after high school. So I went to University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign for college, already started kind of traveling by the time I was, 20, overseas and stuff. So when I graduated, I would just hit the road, traveled for a year and a half without a home, got worn out, moved to Chicago for a year and a half, got sick of being normal, went back on the road. And this time I lasted 15 years. So I made a lot of changes so that I don't get worn out. And pretty much just ended up moving here because, I have a family now. I have a 3-year-old. We tried to do it for a year. The first 6 months were doable. The next 6 months were very difficult. And we just needed that consistency.
Yeah. So you have anything on that? Because I'm curious about something else. So you mentioned earlier that you might be getting back into cash. Did you start in cash, evolve into tournaments, or start in tournament? Like, how is that, and what was the reason for each of it? I'm imagining tournaments are a little hard on the family with how long they take and how much you have to travel, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I started playing cash games. Just that's how I started playing, right? Like playing in the dorms, in the corner rooms and stuff like that. And I'd play online. So I won about 180 grand my sophomore year in college, like in the dorms. And I was playing like huge stakes, like 50, 100, 100, 200. I was battling
online.
Yeah, which were the biggest games back then.
Wow.
Right. This is like what, I don't know, 18, 19 years ago, whatever it is now. And I was playing guys like Prahlad Friedman, Ram Vaswani. I had no idea who these guys were because I wasn't on poker forums. I didn't watch poker on TV. Like this was just like a new thing to me. I discovered. So I'm battling the best. And I was playing way out of my bankroll, right? Like you can't play 100, 200 with, 100 grand, 150 grand. So I was bound to go broke playing those stakes. So I ended up losing it all after becoming kind of a local celebrity, right? So I was in like the school newspaper, like everybody kind of knew about my success at college. And then I went broke and actually got myself in 30K in debt. That was very difficult. It was very embarrassing. My parents were really against poker and trying to talk me out of it. And now this kind of thing happened. That was the big I told you so. I didn't tell them. I didn't really tell anyone for a while. I got super depressed. I had to drop out of school for a semester, work with like the counselor there, get some, try to get my mental health in check, because it's very hard to go, you know, that high and that down in such a short period at such a young age. So it took about, you know, maybe 9 months to kind of, it was very hard to go from playing $20,000 heads up matches to try to grind $5 sit and goes. That was
Yeah.
so hard. So I
Wow.
just kept like borrowing money or like making some money and then like jumping back into 1-2, like tripling it up, going to 2-5. Like, you know, I did it before, I could do it again, right? So that's what kind of why it took 9 months to kind of buckle down. And then my roommate at the time, Andy Seth, we had this like 9-bedroom house we called it the poker house. We'd run games there, we'd have parties. It was awesome. But he was there playing tournaments and having success in tournaments. So I was like, oh, let me try this like tournament thing. So like he was reading Harrington and Hold'em. I talked to him. I learned about like M and shove ranges. I learned a little bit about bankroll management. So I started playing these $5 sit and goes, worked my way up to 10s to 20s to 50s. And then I was satelliting into like the nightly party poker main event, which was like a 215 or 163. Ended up winning that for like 50K, won like an ultimate bet tournament for like 30K, and basically never looked back and became kind of a tournament professional. So I never really studied cash like properly. I was very naturally talented and very aggressive. And then I came back into tournaments and did it the right way.
Yeah, that's so it was basically in your blood, regardless of being in school, whatever the original plan was, no matter what the parents said, you just knew you were going to be in poker.
Yeah, you know, like I think a lot of people would have quit at that point. Like even my
Yeah.
counselor, like I listened to every single thing my counselor suggested I did, which was all very helpful. But they told me not to play poker. I definitely didn't do that. Everyone told me not to play poker, but
Right.
I felt like I had it in me. Like I knew I had a big edge on people, and I had to pursue that passion.
Let's say I get it. Let's say you had all the time in the world. You could do whatever you wanted to do. There wasn't any guilt or commitment or desire to, be with family. What do you enjoy the most? Is it cash or tournaments? If there was just a single Faraz and you could just go out there and be who you are, where do you feel you shine and what do you look forward to?
That's a
Cash or
tough question.
Yeah.
Without having thought about it too deeply, I want to say tournaments. I've always found tournaments just like super fun because you get to play with a lot of different people. Like you're constantly getting shuffled tables. I really enjoy socializing, meeting people, like learning from a lot of different people, making friends, and so I think it's cool to get exposed to so many more people. Also, in tournaments, things are just always changing, right? The blinds change. There's some people, sometimes you're short, you're big. So it's kind of like a journey. It feels like I wrote a tweet about this actually, that it's like you're going on a hike, right? And there's like this peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
And then there's this traveling aspect. And I love traveling. When I was traveling for tournaments, it wasn't just for tournaments. I was vagabonding in between tournaments, like staying on strangers' couches and hostels and all sorts of stuff. So I think when I first started traveling to like European tournaments, it was kind of just an excuse to go see Europe and travel around as well.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, probably tournaments, but I still would enjoy some cash games here and there.
Do you get a lot of people asking you to mentor them in cash?
I do quite a bit actually, and so I'm actually planning on, after this World Series, I'm going to start dabbling in some cash games again. And as I learn it, I'm going to bring everyone else along with me who wants to learn with me. So we'll be able to kind of make like a cool coaching experience out of it as well.
Okay, I have another question. This is kind of for me, but I'll say it's for the viewers. I don't play tournaments, as you know. You've sat with me. It was very obvious. But if you had to, obviously, this isn't going to take away anything from your training, just 3 to 5 just macro points of like what are important points to being successful in tournaments.
Yeah, so I'll talk about kind of like what you should prioritize, and I'll talk about maybe some kind of mindset things that affect people.
Yeah.
So first of all, in terms of what to prioritize, so think about it. In a tournament, most times someone raises, most people fold, and the big blind usually calls because you're getting such a good price. So heads up pots versus the big blinds. That should be your priority. C betting versus the big blind, and then check raising as the big blind. A lot of people skip over C betting versus the big blind, and that's literally like 70% of your decisions. I just made that number up, but it's a very high majority of decisions. When should you C bet big? When should you C bet small? When should you have a check back range? And how do you kind of balance that range? Just everyone skips over it because they want to go to these big, sexy, like, like made for TV spots.
But if you're in the big blind, you're saying there's a lot of people miss the check re-raise because most people are just C betting anyways, right?
Yeah. So like, first of all, what should your big blind flatting range be? A lot of people don't realize that, like a really common question I'll ask people is, hey, you're in the big blind. Do you flat wider when you're deep stack or shallow? And most people will say deep stack because you have it in your head that, oh yeah, you play suited connectors and stuff when you're deep. It's the opposite. When you're deep stack, you actually flat tighter from the big blind. When you're shallow, you flat wider. And the reason for that is reverse implied odds. So we know that in position player has advantage. The deeper the stacks, the bigger that advantage is. So imagine you're playing Phil Ivey heads up, and you're 10 big blinds deep. He's not going to have a huge edge on you, right? Like you flop a pair, you flop a draw, you're going with it. Now imagine you're 1,000 big blinds deep. He could put a lot of pressure on you and so on, right? So yeah, just kind of like knowing things like that, and then knowing how to check raise in the big blind. So yeah, so kind of prioritizing those things that come up the most often. I have an entire like course built around like what those prioritizations should be. And then secondly, there's definitely like, I think people definitely like overvalue their tournament life. A big challenge for a lot of people who don't play a living is you only get to play so often. You kind of negotiated this time away from your family or your business.
Yeah, you want to last.
One time you get to play and you want to hang on, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to check raise because it's scary and the chips are going to get all in. You don't want to reshove. And that is a big, big mental block that you got to get over. And you just have to trust the process, because by taking those reshoves, by doing those check raise that might cause you to bust, they're also going to allow you to have a bigger stack. So now when you get kings to aces, when you get jacks to ace king, you're going to have a bigger stack and you're going to be able to survive in the tournament and last longer. So it's kind of counterintuitive of how you last longer. And you just have to trust that process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I would think human nature does exactly what you said, the opposite.
Yeah, and then people,
go ahead.
Yeah, and then people come in and common thing is like, hey, I always make day two or the money with a small stack. I always like dwindle into the bond table with a small stack. How do I change that? It's like, well, that thing. So there's like, I have like literally like 6 videos and topics that are built around those key mistakes that people make because of that mindset that we just talked about.
Sure. Yeah, it's very interesting. I've never even discussed tournament play because there's just no need to, but just even hearing that little tidbit is so interesting to me, because I would have no idea. When I go into a tournament, I am stumped.
Yeah, I mean, the big differences are that you got to understand how to play shallower stack sizes. Like 60 big blinds, 30 big blinds, 20 big blinds, the reshoves, like you could even start open limping when you're at like 12 to 15 big blinds and so on. So yeah, it's more dynamic, which I think also makes a little bit more fun for me as well. I will say one thing. I played a WPT televised cash game a couple of years ago, and I hadn't played much cash in like 10 years really. So I went and trained for it. Hired a coach. I played like 10 hours of, no, maybe like 30 hours of live poker the week before. And I was pretty surprised how much overlap there was between all the stuff I'd learned in tournaments and how much of it applied to cash games. It's just like the ranges are obviously different because of how much tighter you're playing in cash games. And the fact that you're playing deep stack poker, like having the nuts or blocking the nuts and that kind of stuff becomes more important. You might do a lot more pot controlling and so on.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Do you have any more of those fundamentals, or do you want to tell us what you said the mental part is? Did you already touch on that by saying that you have to re-click what you normally want to do?
Yeah, the mental part I was talking about was people kind of hanging on to their tournaments. So yeah, and I guess the second thing I add on to that normally is telling people to have something else you're excited about on that trip, because when all your eggs are in that one tournament, it's hard, right? So for me, I have multiple tournaments I'm playing. But sometimes I'll even like, I might pick destinations where I have like a close friend I really want to meet up with, or some event or something. So I have
Yeah.
a couple different things I'm excited about on every trip.
That's cool.
So I'm not just so like all my eggs aren't in that one tournament. So even if it means like play a smaller buy-in and play like 4 tournaments instead of one, like that also helps.
Yeah, so now that the World Series of Poker has released their schedule and we're on this topic, what do you typically recommend your students to do as far as tournaments? Like, what's the best bang for a recreational's buck?
Yeah, so we're actually launching I haven't actually announced this, so you guys are hearing this first, but I'm actually coaching Greg Goes All In. You guys know him, well-known
Yeah, yeah.
creator.
Yeah.
So, he came into this game 3 years ago and really came in from like content first and then playing second. And, he was like, hey, I really want to take my game seriously this WSOP and really step it up. So I'm coaching him one-on-one, and we're doing this thing, we're allowing like other people to come in and join on his one-on-one coaching session, ask questions in the chat. There's going to be like homework and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, that's a course we're about to announce like literally in a week. So if anyone wants to get on that, I'll just mention the URL. It's jaka.poker/WSOP24. Um, that is going to be perfect for anyone looking to train for WSOP. But what I would say is, yeah, it just, leveraging those spots that come up the most often. And then the second part is just understanding where population makes a lot of mistake in WSOP. So we just talked about how people flat too much instead of 3-bet because they're hanging on, they don't want to bloat pots.
Right. Right.
People also don't check raise enough because they don't want to bloat pots. People don't reshove enough because they don't want to bloat pots. So how can you exploit all of those things? That's something you want to make sure you learn how to do. It's hard for me to just explain in a couple of minutes.
Right.
No, but I played a bunch of orbits with you, and it's very, what you're saying is exactly like what I noticed from you. You're very aggressive, and I'm sure there was a rhyme and reason to it, like you said, in different spots. But I even know myself, I'm like, oh fuck, I don't know if I want to call this, or because you're behind me and I know it's going to get
Try
popped.
playing with his students.
Right,
Oh, my
right.
God.
So
So
why do you
we do a mix of like concept lessons, and then the other thing is like hand history review stuff. So it's got to be a mix of like fine tuning these fundamentals, and then also just like reviewing and talking hands with people. That is the number one thing I'll say. I talk to people who like have been playing 10, 15 years, and I'm like, do you write down your hands? And they're like, like not really. Like, do you talk hands with people? And I'm amazed at how many people don't do that. That is probably the number one way that I've learned poker, like just
Yeah.
asking my friends, hands. So, the kind of 3-part, like how do you prepare and get better at poker? I tell, document your hands, spend an hour a week doing that, documenting and reviewing your own hands, spend an hour a week discussing hands with other players. And then the third thing is consuming 2 hours spending some sort of learning content, and it should be structured, right? Like you can't just go watch on YouTube and this and that, because again, you're just wasting your time. There's too much stuff to study. Like I can't study it all either. So it's who wins is who knows how to prioritize well and be efficient. So that's kind of the 3 things you can do. It takes you 4 to 5 hours a week. If you could do that at least half the weeks in the year, you're going to be ahead of the curve.
Yeah, my question was alluding to as far as bang for your buck, like a lot of new players want to play in like the monster stack, the big stack, as many big blinds as possible, but the structures aren't always the greatest. Otherwise, these tournaments would last for like 2 weeks. What do you think structure wise newer players should be looking for? Because it's not always the most chips.
Yeah. Well, Monster Stack, you get a lot of chips and a lot of play, right? So that would be one you get a lot of play. But I think a lot of the other tournaments you don't, just like you're saying. So if you are going to be playing a tournament that's going to be faster structure, you want to be really good at playing those, 10 to 40 big blind stack sizes, which means study reshove ranges. Understand how your raise range and your 3-bet ranges change, shallow stack versus deep stacked. And the quick answer to that is you play a lot more blocker hands. You don't play like 6, 7 suited and those things as your light opens. You play like king 5 suited, queen 9 suited. Those are the hands you 3-bet with or do loose opens with. So understanding how things shift during the reshove thing, and then some of those things again, the flatting from the big blind and check raising from the big blind. at those shallow stack depths. So, I
Yeah.
mean, you could really like in like 5 hours, you could get really good at that stuff. But
Yeah.
a lot of people just don't prioritize well or don't know what to study. A lot of people I talk to, they get thrown into training sites and they're like, I don't know where to start. I'm overwhelmed. So like what I
Yeah.
do is like I have learning paths where I have this thing called MTT Crash Course. I'm like, everyone start here, then go to the next learning path, go to the next learning path. Because I think that's the big thing, doing it in the right order.
I love that. I mean, when I first started poker, I was reading every book, like watching every video I could, but it did get to a point, I think in the late 2000s, where it was just oversaturated. Everyone had information about how to play what, and then it just became too much and you don't know where to go.
Yeah. And, I'm lucky because, well, I play cash only, and I'm lucky because everything I do is on tape. So when I study, I'm able to, with people I study with and some of the trainers, I'm able to go back and literally see my mistakes, my tendencies, my weaknesses, like you had mentioned, right? Like write down your hands.
Playing on camera is a huge advantage to work on your game. Every time I have a student who's like on TV playing and I get to see their whole cards, then like some of the things we've been working through would just like some light bulbs go off and then like boom, we could seal up those leaks.
Yeah, it's a huge advantage to be able to do that. I have a question. Why do you think, I don't know why, why do you think, because I don't know his game, I don't know what his strategy is. Why is someone like Phil Hellmuth, why has he been so successful in tournaments? And like a Sean Deeb? Because they seem like they have different styles. I could be wrong.
I mean, I think that's the cool thing about poker, right? Like you could be good at so many different things that make you a good player. Like some people just like really good at like counting combinations and know all the math. Other people are just really good at reading people and like adapting. And I think Phil falls into that second category. Like he just has a really good feel for where he's at. I think Phil has a great table presence. I think he makes people pretty uncomfortable. Just the way he kind of talks to people and stares at people. And obviously like he has this kind of aura around him amongst like especially like recreational players or even some pros too, to be honest. And I think he understands how to use that to his advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just was curious because he's had such wild success, and now you see someone like Sean Deeb is just crushing. And
but the thing is, no one respects Phil. That's the weird thing. He's so
that's
successful.
So ridiculous.
I don't know if it's just his personality, the way he is. He doesn't get respect, but
yeah.
He
well,
doesn't
I think people get annoyed at kind of him like claiming he's as good as he is, and then other people don't agree with that, and they, it kind of makes them feel a certain way. You know what I mean? And I don't know, man. Like that's just how Phil drives himself. Like that's like he has a way that he pushes himself and drives himself, and his success at this point is unprecedented. Like you can't really deny it.
Yeah, it's kind of the weird dichotomy because what drives him and how he acts, because it drives him, actually brings the drama and the hate to him, because people are like, well, you just automatically don't like someone that kind of frames it that way. But at the end of the day, the guy, like you said, his stats are just, I mean, it's just, you can't get around it. So for people not to respect anything about his poker game is ridiculous to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I imagine like the way he lashes out, I don't think he likes that he does that, right? It's a reaction. So I try to have compassion for people that have. Yeah, he's not doing that on purpose. Like I think anyone who knows Phil personally knows he's a super good dude.
He's a really great guy.
I've just seen him over and over again, like do things for people where it's not public. He's not getting any credit for it. And he's just doing it just to be a good guy. I've seen that over and over again from him, and anyone who knows him close will tell you the same thing.
I did a fundraiser and I didn't have his contact information. I didn't even invite him, and he showed up to it and he gave me $2,000 and was just like the coolest guy. I'm like, Phil, what the hell?
Yeah, he
and then
really
all of a sudden, because he showed up, all these people came into my live chat, and then I raised a ton of money for that fundraiser.
He's a good dude. I know him like you guys do, and I have a little bit of a relationship with him, and I'm just amazed because I'm like, guys, whoever's doing this, like, you don't understand, this is a really good guy. And when you got 17 bracelets, shut up. You know what I mean? That's just it. It speaks for itself,
Yeah, it does suck when he blows up the way he blows up, like, but
Yeah.
it just
So-
it is what it is, and
That's
yeah.
helped build his brand though when he does it
Yeah.
live. To be honest with you, you know,
Yeah.
I hate to say it. Yeah.
So speaking of bracelets, you won your first bracelet last year, right?
Yeah.
It was the 1500 shootout, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did that feel?
Felt awesome. It's one of those things where, like, as a any good poker player knows, it doesn't freaking matter. But obviously from like a branding perspective, it's a huge deal. Right, that stuff just matters, right? Like when you go charity events or sponsorship, and this, like, they need some sort of title to put on you, so it's obviously important from that standpoint. And I don't know, the whole like chasing braces thing is pretty fun too, right? So it's just like, it feels kind of like a game. So that was super awesome. It was the first time I had like all my students and stuff, like, at a final table with me. So that was awesome, just having all them there and seeing the energy and kind of inspiring them. So yeah, it was a great feeling.
Any questions about that?
No.
So I just want to know before we finish, like what Jaka Coaching has coming forward people this year, or what are your plans for this year? Give us how students can log on and like what they can look forward to if they do.
Yeah. So our website is jakacoaching.com. And we highly specialize in tournament poker, but we actually just launched cash games. So one of the guys that I'm talking strategy and learning from is Fausto Valdez. He's a sick cash game player. So he's the one starting to make cash game content on our site right now. I'll probably join him doing that myself later in the year. But yeah, really, go through those learning paths. Our membership includes, just about everything. And if you want to train for WSOP, then, go to that jaka.poker/WSOP24. And that's going to be a pretty unique opportunity to train for WSOP with us.
I have to say, I really appreciate you and what you're doing. And like, of course, for me, I'm so happy to see how many women are becoming successful on your site and feel comfortable being a part of your team. But when you and I, we were sitting together for a good part of that day, and you were so kind to everyone at the table, friendly. If people ask you questions, you were not like, "Whoa, dude, I'm not, I don't want to talk about that." Like, you were easygoing, easy to talk to. And then I remember talking to you about the hand that I busted out, and I think I had queens or something. Anyway, you talked to me like I was your peer. You weren't like, "Oh yeah, couldn't help it." Like, you actually talked to me about the hand, and you showed me so much kindness, and you didn't talk to me like I didn't know what I was doing. You really talked to me like I was your peer. And I appreciated that so much from you, and just seeing all of your success and your student success. Really, I mean, it couldn't happen to a better person. I'm really, it was a really nice time playing with you.
I hate to agree with her.
I hate to agree with her because it's just something that I just hate to do. But I had the same vibe from you when I played at the same table. You were very, very kind to everyone at the table, the whole thing. So I'm glad I got to meet you even a little more today. I was looking forward to doing that. And
thanks.
That was because of Veronica, who contacted you for the interview.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it happened. All
right, cool. And I'll see you guys soon at WSOP.
Yeah.
I'm excited
we'll see you
for it.
there. If
Yeah.
you do want to get into a game, let me know. If for all that PR you got off
some
Jeff.
whales for his cash
if you got,
game. So.
yeah, if you got any, all that PR I gave you, sure. If you want to fire over some bullets over my way, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
After WSOP, I'll start playing cash, and I'll hit you
All
up.
right. I'm not
see you on
sure.
Hustler.
I'm not sure you're totally optimal for the game, but because I like you, you definitely will get the.
I'm fun for home games. People, I splash around. I'll talk smack.
If you're a splasher, you're in.
I'm not
We'll try you out on Max Payne Monday.
I'm not a
Yeah,
guy
you're
who's
in
gonna have a
you're in
hood and
anyways.
sunglasses on and be talking strategy.
All right.
I know how to
Okay.
gamble it up.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure. You have anything else?
No, thank you
All right.
so much for your time, and thanks. Sorry for the delay. We really appreciate
Yeah,
you
no
waiting.
problem.
Appreciate that. So this is the Nick Fertucci Show. I am Nick Fertucci. For my co-host Valerie here, Faraz, thank you. It's been a great interview. It was very informational. Even the 10, 15 seconds you gave just when I asked you that question that's so helpful. I mean, I know that's like such a small micro dot of.
I got a whole book of it in here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So thank you for doing that and sharing that with us and everything else. And V, out.
Peace out.